Hey everybody, how's it going? Tech Project 5 is up this week. It has to do with creating mockups using smart objects. This can be a bit of a complicated process, so I want to run through a little bit of the basics first in a demo where I show you some things to kind of fill in the cracks of what you might have picked up otherwise elsewhere or on the LinkedIn Learning videos. So first up, I have a template file that I've downloaded. This is just one sample that you can get from lots of different places, but in the assignment, there's a link to a page, graphics field, where you can download any number of different free templates for smart object-based mockups. So for this assignment, the reason that link is in there and the reason I want you to look at some of these is so you get a feel for how a mockup is designed, how the PSD file works in terms of its structure, layer organization, and everything else. You want to make one that would fit in on this page. If you were to upload and share your mockup with somebody else, you want it to be functional and have some utility. So get familiar with how a mockup file should work so that when you make yours, you can do a good one. All right, that said, this particular mockup file is for a design for soda can. Now, when you open it up, first thing you notice in the layers panel over here is a top layer says mockup, edit me. And as you know, hopefully you've started on some of the lynda.com stuff. You can double click on that icon there, and it'll open up the smart object. In this case, it's just a flat 2D design of, it looks like a poster almost, but this is the graphic that's going to wrap around the soda can to give it its design as if it were actually printed on that object. Just to play with this and see how it works, I'm going to create a blank layer over the top. Let's fill that with a solid color and then switch to the paintbrush tool, white brush maybe, and I'm just going to scribble on there a little bit just so that we can see the effect when I save this. Control S to save. Let that update, and then we'll jump back over to our mockup, and the changes that I made to that mockup, the smart object, they get applied to the design, including transformations, shadows, reflections, highlights, all the stuff that makes it look like that design is actually on the can. But if the client says, you know what, could that scribble be yellow instead of white? And could you maybe add some swirls to it or something else? Or actually like have a real design? You want to make changes to that. You don't want to have to go through the compositing workflow of highlights and shadows, contours, shading, reflections, all that stuff is ridiculous to do over and over again in this mockup stage. So instead, what you would want to do is just be able to go here, double click on your smart object again, come into your design and maybe add some text or, whatever else you want to do, just add it in here. We can go back to Scratch and fill that with white now. Let's add some text on here. Ooh, what do I have? I don't even know what text I had last time. Text. There we go. Super fancy. That's going to be our soda can. We'll hit save. Jump back over here. And now we've got this. And rapidly, we can really quickly just throw in a design onto this. A client or another designer, somebody else, maybe like, let's say an illustrator artist can go in and they can make their two-dimensional flat layout of this design and then send it to you, or you can send them the mockup file and just drag and drop that artwork into the design and prototype and preview what it's going to look like. So that's one example. These mockup files are very, very common for product packaging and things along those lines. You can use it for all sorts of things, and I'm going to show you a slightly different example here, but that's basically how it works. Now, to look under the hood, so to speak, and see what's going on, let's turn off some of these layers and let's turn them on one at a time. So we've got a folder for BG, that's the background. If we turn that on, that gives us our background, and the background is just a solid layer. We have this solid fill color. We can click on that, change it to whatever, and that's going to be really easy for us if we want to modify things non-destructively. A good thing to do when you're making a smart object, a mockup file, I should say. And then in this case, there are some shadows and highlights that have been added in. Let me turn those on and off one at a time just so you can see. And that's totally, up to you whether you want to do that kind of thing or not. If you start with the photograph, then the photograph is the background. You don't really need to build a background. So don't feel like you have to do that. but this one, it made sense to make it look realistic. The can in this particular image is made from scratch as well. You do not have to do that. So just because this sample shows like this can that's made completely from scratch, don't think you have to do that. So in this case, there's like reflections and shadows and everything built up from scratch. All the highlights, the everything that makes it look like an actual photorealistic soda can, it's just Photoshop work. Don't feel like you have to do that. My recommendation is start with a photo and then make a mock-up from that. And I'll show you how, but just so you know, that's all gone into this process. Now, the one thing I do want you to see is right here. This layer that says mockup. We've got another one at the top that says mockup as well. So looking at this one, it's the exact same thing. Your mockup, you can have multiple. Okay, I keep saying mockup when I mean smart object. Your smart object can be duplicated into many, many instances. And then if you change one, it changes the others as well. That's one of the beautiful things about a smart object, is that you can have multiple instances. So this mockup layer, it's simply a smart object. We have multiple instances. Now, the designer of this mockup file didn't want people to come in and screw things up. And so you'll notice that there is a smart object layer buried deep down inside one of these subfolders for the can base. Let's just turn everything else back on real quick. I'm sure there's a keyboard shortcut to do this all at once, but I'm just going to click and drag across those little eyeballs, turn everything on. Okay. So we know that there is a smart object layer down in here, and there's a copy or duplicate or another instance of that smart object layer up here at the very top, where nobody's going to miss the fact that, hey, there's that mockup layer. Just click on this to edit it. Okay. Now we'll come back to that. There's another group here. This is master adjustments. If we open that up, you can see there's not a whole lot there. We just have some lighting effects that are applied. We turn that on and off. You can see it's pretty subtle, but that just adds a little bit of lighting to the space. You can do with that as you will. You don't have to have that kind of thing either. So really, you will need to have some adjustments in your mockup file. Lost the train of thought there. It's going to be one of the requirements of the assignment that you have a photograph for your base. You do some compositing, whether that's cloning something out originally or just adding something in, and then building the mockup into a functional working PSD file that uses Smart Object as its base is going to include layers, adjustments, and obviously a Smart Object, but lots of work to make it look photorealistic and to be usable and understandable to a user that you might send this PSD to or provide it on the internet for people to download and try out. Okay, so we're going to go through and do that now on a different file. And so let's close this thing. I don't need to save it. I've got this photo of a stapler. Pretty awesome, right? I want to make this into a smart object just because it's a random thing that popped up in a search real quick. Actually, this is a photo that I shot as a demo in one of the photo classes. But anyway, we want to make a mock-up for just the purposes of this assignment and really nothing else that allows a user to put a different logo onto this stapler. It says swing line right now. We want to get rid of that and allow it to say something else. So first thing I need to do is get rid of this logo right there. So lots of different ways we can do this. This doesn't have anything to do with making a mock-up, but I'm just going to quick polygonal lasso around that and give this a try. I'm doing this for the first time while I'm recording this demo, so chances are it's not going to work right, and I can show you, here's some things that work, and oh look, there's something that doesn't. So now that I've got that selected, I can just go up here. Let's go edit, and we want to do content aware fill. This is going to open up the content aware fill, and let's give it a second. Is it thinking? Oh, it's over here. Previews are kind of weird. Let me move my face out of the way. Okay, so our sampling area, what do we have going on here? It's not content aware filling anything apparently. What did we do? Well, okay, so content overfill. This one, usually I get really good results with that. What's going on? Super easy results. But I'm going to skip that right now. Let's just do this a simpler way. There's much simpler ways to do the content overfill. Let's try this Shift F5 and content aware. This is Shift F5 is just going to be an easy way for you to access the fill dialog, and you can fill colors, patterns, black or gray or white, or content aware. Let's choose content aware. And there we go. Hit OK. Oh, mode. We want normal, I believe. Give it a second. And it filled it in. It's not great. So let's just get rid of that. But it took care of the edges for us, and that's going to be simple to fix now. I'm not worried about this being too precise because we're going to do some other stuff when we get the other logo added in. But let's mess around just because we can. A little bit. I'm going to make another lasso around this. This time just a freehand lasso. Should have used a polygonal lasso because I can't draw with a mouse. Let's try that again. Polygonal lasso, and we'll get this nice and close. Just get all of that white content or fill junk out of there real quick. And then we'll switch over to the patch tool. Let's try that out. Patch tool right there. Let's see if we can just move that up here a little bit and sample and fill. Good. Okay. All right. That wasn't the point of the assignment, and it's not perfect still. I would probably clean this up if it were a real job, but gets us close enough. Now, to make my smart object, this is the trick that's going to make your life a little bit easier if you follow this step. All right. So I want to choose an area to make into a smart object before I actually put anything into it. So to do that, I'm going to use the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to ballpark this and just figure how big is the rectangle where my logo is going to need to fit. And I can do this. Let's go into the select menu and choose transform selection. There we go. Then let's rotate this around. And really, I don't actually want to rotate it, but I just want to make sure that I'm about the right size for that logo to fit into, and I think it needs to be a little smaller. But I'm just going to undo that a little bit because I don't actually want it to be rotated. Trust me, you don't want it to be rotated. That was just a preview. So I undid it back to where I have this nice vertical horizontal lines in my rectangle. Maybe make it a little bit smaller this way, and maybe, yeah, I don't know, that's probably good. We'll hit OK, and then that's what my smart object is going to be. And to make it a smart object, I just need some pixels there. So I'll just press Alt Delete or Option Delete, fill it with black. You can fill it with whatever color you want. And I forgot one thing. I need to make a new layer first. So undo. We don't want to just paint on our background. Let's make a new layer. There we go. Then we can fill it with black or white. Doesn't matter really, or whatever our foreground and background colors are. We can deselect that. And then right click on our layer, and we want to make this a smart object. Okay, it's our smart object now. And I'm going to, before I go any further, just name this mockup. Okay, and I may rename it other things later too, but double click on that and you'll see what we get is this nice, tidy little rectangle that's going to fit our content easily. We can use the type tool in this. We don't have to worry about any transformations or anything else. And I'll make a new blank layer there too. We don't need that layer 1 even, but let's just try this out. Actually, let's keep the white rectangle for a second. Let's come back here. Okay, now I can make whatever transformations that I want, and those are going to be applied to the smart object, not to the contents of the smart object. So when you're working with smart objects, you always have to kind of keep that separate in your head. There's the smart object, which is what you see in the layers panel, and then the smart object's contents, which are what you're going to open up over here. We don't want this to be all distorted and transformed, but it's okay for it to be done over here. So now we'll just enter fruit transform, Control T or Command T. Let's put this into position. We'll just rotate it to get it close here. And then if we want to grab those individual handles, this was a quiz question, right? Hold down Control and click on one of those handles. We can move it independently. Let's warp this a little bit to make it fit. Perspective wise, I think something like that's close enough for what I'm doing right now anyways. We'll apply that, hit OK. And then let's go back over to our smart object now. We can get rid of the white. We don't need that. Let's add some text. So I don't know what I have here. Nouveau Grotesque. I don't know what that font even is. Let's make it a little smaller, I'm guessing. Still kind of big. But lorem ipsum works for my purposes right now. Let's just go with it. And make it a little bit littler. Okay, and it probably should be white so it shows up on that black stapler, right? Okay, let's hit save, Control S, jump back over to our mockup, and the text fits into perspective really easily. So I highly recommend this step of what I showed you. Work with a rectangular marquee, fill it, keep it a rectangle, keep it in not in perspective, just keep it straight, vertical, and horizontal. Make it a smart object, and then go ahead and make any transformations. Otherwise, getting things to work is going to be a real pain. Now, let's say we want that text to be kind of indented or raised from the surface. We want it to look like it's carved into that little plastic plate, maybe. We definitely don't want to do any of that stuff here. We want this to be just simple text, right? We want to make sure that anything that we're doing is happening over here in our smart object. So then I could just come into layer effects for my smart object layer, and let's do maybe bevel. Let's check the preview down here and see what we're getting in that bevel. Let's do the light direction. We want to kind of make that match the lighting in the photo, and I think the lighting is coming from this angle. Well, it's coming from all over, but high. Let's change the size, the depth. Let's bring that in a little bit more. I don't know. It's not precise. It's not pretty yet because this is quick and dirty. But anyway, let's make this, I don't know, something like that. Who knows? Let's go with it. So that was fast. It was not pretty, but we would continue to build on it from this point forward. We could do other things like let's add maybe a gradient over the top of it. We'll add a mask or a clipping mask so that it applies to just one place, but let's add this little gradient so that it gets lighter on one side and darker on the other. We'll play with this some more. Make that a clipping mask, right click on that, create clipping mask. That's going to only apply to that text right there. And we can play with this more. We can change colors. We can do whatever, but anyway. I don't like the opacity. I get distracted when I start actually doing things, and I can't talk anymore while I'm recording the video, so sorry about that. It's not quite finished. It's probably, the transformation's not perfect. I would want to do a little bit more effects, maybe take out the italic from the base text and everything. But from this point, I would say let's group this. You can name this whatever you want, but I want people to not mess with this content because that's what makes the smart object look the way that it looks in terms of all the color and whatever else that I do to it. I can come in here into my mockup and let's just duplicate that one time. We'll alt drag it up. Let's going to make a copy and move it at the same time. Okay, this version doesn't need to have these effects on it, so we're going to let's get rid of those. Let's delete the layer effects, clear layer style, there we go. Turn the visibility off. We don't want two copies of it, but this is the one that we want people to edit. Edit this mockup layer. So all that somebody has to do is just double click on this and it's going to take them in to work on it. Okay, so let's try that one more time. Let's make a change to it now. So in here, Let's say that we want our text to have a rainbow gradient over the top of it. We'll just make a new layer. We'll clip that layer, right click and do create clipping mask. And then let's get our gradient tool out, and there's a gradient, there we go. And shoot, why not a green to cyan? Let's give it a try. We'll just drag that across right here. And we've got this weird looking little gradient. Hit save, jump back over. And now we've got a gradient in there. Not that we need that to be there for any particular reason, other than I just wanted to show you how easy it is to make changes to things in a photograph once you have it inside of a smart object. So a smart object mockup is super valuable and useful tool. It's a great trick to know. Save you a lot of time when you're iterating and prototyping things out. Hopefully that helps as you're working on this project. Show your progress, share it, ask questions, use Slack, and I'll talk to you guys later.